As the oak library door swung open, I stepped quietly into the Carter family's memory-laden space in Greenville, Connecticut, with my son Noah by my side. His small hand rested in mine, a fragile anchor against the storm brewing within me. Before the lawyer could speak, my brother Stephen cut in coldly, his voice sharp with venom. "You're getting nothing, Michael. Dad hated you." No greeting, no glance. He flung the words like a blade, their echo filling the room as if meant for all to hear. Each syllable, each sound, struck my chest like a blow, painful but not surprising. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. I gripped Noah's hand tighter, feeling his tiny fingers tremble in my palm. I tried to smile at him, but the smile was thin, shaky, on the verge of dissolving. Noah, only 10, looked up at me with bright eyes, as if to say he was still here, by my side. But I knew he understood. Noah always understood, despite his age. I led Noah to a cold leather chair at the table's end, when a harsh laugh rang out from across the room. Uncle George, my father's older brother, leaned back, hands clasped behind his head, a smirk spreading like an oil slick across his face. "Even the kid knows his dad's useless," he said, his low voice loud enough for the room to hear, his gaze flicking toward Noah as if he weren't human. My heart clenched. Blood rushed to my face, burning, but I bit down hard, forcing myself not to leap up and scream at him. Noah lowered his head, his eyes sinking to the polished wood floor, and I felt my heart crack further. I wanted to hug him, to shield him from those venomous words, but I could only grip his shoulder, as if my strength could flow into him. I glanced around, catching nods of agreement from cousins, from Dad's old friends, people who'd chosen their side long ago, and I wasn't on it. The Carter family library, with its oak bookshelves stretching to the ceiling and dim light filtering through windows, now felt like an arena. Every glance, every whisper, was a dagger aimed at me. The scent of polished wood, mixed with Stephen's overpowering cologne, suffocating me, as if the room's air was laced with poison. Stephen stood at the table's head, arms crossed, his smug smile never fading. He said nothing more, but his eyes, cold, contemptuous, spoke volumes. He knew I was sinking, and he relished watching me struggle. I guided Noah to sit, trying to keep my voice steady as I whispered, "Don't mind them, okay?" But my words were frail, swallowed by the heavy air. Noah nodded, but his eyes stayed glued to the floor, and I knew he was hiding his pain. He was always stronger than his youth, but he was still just a child, and Uncle George's words were like hammer blows to his tender pride. Stephen turned his head slowly, his gaze locking onto me. His smile held no warmth, only malice. "You know, Michael," he said, his voice smooth as a snake, "coming here was pointless. Dad left nothing for someone like you. He said you're no longer his son." His words echoed what he'd said when I arrived, but this time, they carried a different poison, certainty, as if he'd read the will, and knew I'd leave empty-handed. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was dry, as if every word had been drained from me. I just bowed my head, staring at the wood grain on the table, trying to hide the storm raging inside. I remembered 8 years ago, when I left this family. My father, William, stood at the Carter mansion's door, eyes bloodshot, shouting that I was a traitor for refusing to take over Carter Properties, the real estate empire he'd built his life around. I couldn't live under his pressure, the suffocating expectation that I'd become his clone or Stephen's. When I hugged Noah, then just 2, and walked away, he slammed the door, declaring I was no longer his son. I swore I'd never return, that I'd build a new life in New Haven, where I worked as a mechanic, and gave every moment to Noah. But a plain white envelope from Dad's lawyer, with no explanation, dragged me back here to this room, where I knew I wasn't welcome. Whispers from those around me snapped me back to the present. A cousin, who once played ball with me as a kid, now shook his head, his eyes full of pity. One of Dad's old friends muttered to another, loud enough for me to hear, "Such a shame. Why even show up?" I swallowed hard, my face burning, as if the whole room were ablaze around me. I wanted to stand, to pull Noah out of here, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. I stayed, not for Stephen or Uncle George, but because a small, foolish part of me still hoped Dad had left a sign, a message, anything to prove he'd once thought of me. Uncle George remained leaning back, his smirk unshaken. He looked at me, his eyes saying I was a joke, a failure unworthy of this room. Stephen stood with arms crossed, his gaze piercing through me. "Sit tight, Michael," he said, his tone commanding. "At least you get to watch us divide the estate before you leave with nothing." Soft laughter followed, like needles pricking my skin. I looked at Noah, saw him still calm, his bright eyes waiting for something. Stephen and Uncle George's cruel words echoed in my mind, like endless knife cuts. The Carter family library, now a glass cage, trapped me in contemptuous stares and poisonous whispers. I stared at the table's wood grain, seeking an anchor to keep from drowning in the emotional storm rising within. But then, as if my mind sought escape, I was pulled back to the past, 8 years ago, when I abandoned this family and lost my father, William. I left, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Carter Properties, the real estate empire Dad devoted his life to, wasn't just a job, it was a cage, with suffocating expectations that I sacrifice my dreams, my values, to serve the family. Stephen, with his smug smile and masterful manipulation, stayed, solidifying his place as the perfect son. He not only won Dad's favor, but painted me as a traitor in everyone's eyes. Uncle George, with his biting remarks about loyalty and blood, always sided with Dad, calling me a quitter at every chance. But I chose Noah. I chose a life where I could be a real father, unbound by the family's ambitions. I took Noah to New Haven, an hour's drive from Greenville, but a world apart. We lived in a small apartment, with the smell of motor oil on my clothes, and the sound of buses through the window. I worked as a mechanic, a modest job, but enough to raise Noah, and give him moments of joy, evenings playing basketball in the backyard, teaching him to fix his bike, or nights sprawled on the couch, watching movies. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was all that mattered. Still, deep inside, I carried an unhealing pain, the pain of a son rejected, erased by his family. I remember trying to reach Dad, the letters I wrote but never sent, the calls I dialed then quickly hung up. Once I took Noah to the mansion, hoping Dad would want to meet his grandson, but the housekeeper said he didn't want to see us. I stood outside the gate, Noah clutching my hand, his eyes full of questions, and I lied that Grandpa was busy. But Noah, with his uncanny sensitivity, seemed to know it wasn't true. He never asked again, but his eyes always made me wonder. Did Dad ever think of me, even once? A plain white envelope from Dad's lawyer, with only an address and time, brought me back here. I didn't know why I came, maybe a foolish hope that Dad left a sign, a message, anything to prove he remembered me. But now, sitting in this library under contemptuous stares and vicious words, I felt like a fool. Stephen and Uncle George were right. I didn't belong here. I was an outsider. A piece discarded from the Carter family's perfect puzzle. I looked at Noah, saw him sitting upright, hands folded neatly in his lap, his eyes scanning the room as if observing everything. He said nothing, but his calm made me uneasy, as if he were waiting for something I didn't know. I whispered, "You okay?" He nodded, flashing a small smile, as if to say he was still here, still strong. But I knew he was hiding the hurt from Uncle George's words. The whispers around us rose again, like knives slicing into me. Stephen stood with arms crossed, his gaze drilling through me. Uncle George leaned back, his smirk unmoved. I stared at the table, the wood grain swirling like a maze, and asked myself, why am I still here? For more humiliation, the oak door creaked, and Robert Hayes, Dad's lawyer, entered. He carried a thick stack of documents, his black suit impeccably pressed, his eyes weary but emotionless. The room instantly straightened, like predators ready to pounce. My heart beat faster, though I told myself I expected nothing. No money, no property, nothing. But deep down, a small foolish part of me still hoped Dad had left a sign, a message, anything to prove he'd thought of me. Hayes set the documents on the table, adjusted his glasses, and began reading the will in a monotone, as if it were routine. To my son Stephen Carter, he said, I leave the family mansion in Greenville, and all primary shares in Carter Properties. Stephen didn't move, but I sensed his satisfaction, like a toxic scent. He glanced at his wife, Helen, beside him, and she nodded, her eyes gleaming, as if already planning to redecorate. Hayes continued, to my brother George Carter, I leave the lakefront property and remaining company share. Uncle George leaned back, smirking, like a king crowned. He pulled the cigar from his mouth, biting it lightly, his eyes smug as if he'd won a high-stakes game. Others, cousins, Dad's friends, received their portions, a vintage car collection for one, an investment fund for another. With each name called, my heart tightened, as if a door were slamming shut before me. Then, what I dreaded came. Hayes paused, turned to a new page, and said evenly, as previously stated, my son Michael Carter will receive no portion of this estate. His words hit like a hammer to my chest. My breath caught as if the room's air had been sucked out. Stephen let out a soft, icy laugh, as if he'd known. Uncle George shook his head, his eyes full of fake pity. Others whispered, their voices low but clear, deserved, brought it on himself. I stared at the table, hiding the tears welling up. I told myself I expected nothing, that I was prepared. But the truth was, I'd hoped foolishly, naively, that Dad left even a single line, a keepsake, anything to say he'd thought of me. Now his will was a final verdict, confirming I'd been dead to him for years. I recalled a childhood moment when Dad patted my shoulder, smiled, and said I'd make him proud. It was a rare memory, a flicker of light in our tense relationship. But now that memory only hurt more, like a promise never kept. I'd tried to be the son he wanted. I tried, until I couldn't. I left to protect Noah, to give my son a life free from crushing expectations. In return, I lost my father, my family, and now, my last shred of hope. I stood, gripping Noah's hand, ready to pull him out before the whispers and contemptuous stares crushed me entirely. "Let's go," I whispered, my voice trembling. Noah looked at me, his eyes calm but worried, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the word. My hand shook, not from anger, but from the pain tearing through me. I didn't need Dad's money, the mansion, or share. I just wanted him to remember me, even once. But this will made it clear. I was nothing to him. Stephen looked at me, his smirk still there. "I told you, Michael," he said, his voice gleeful. "You don't belong here." Uncle George nodded, his eyes saying I was a joke, a failure, unworthy of this room. I stood there, clutching Noah's hand, my foot lifted to pull him out of the Carter family library, away from the contemptuous stares and poisonous whispers, still echoing around me. Robert Hayes' declaration that I'd received nothing from Dad's will still felt like a hammer blow to my chest, leaving a painful void in my heart. Stephen and Uncle George, with their smug smiles, had won. They always won. I just wanted to escape this room. But then, as I moved to leave, Noah spoke, his voice small but sharp, cutting through the stifling silence like a blade. "You forgot Grandpa's video." The room froze. I turned to Noah, stunned, my heart pounding. Stephen, arms crossed at the table's head, frowned, his smug smile vanishing. Uncle George, still leaning back, sat upright, his suspicious gaze darting to Noah. The whispers stopped, and every eye, cousins, Dad's friends, fixed on my son. Hayes, the lawyer, paused flipping through papers, his pen hovering. I looked at Noah, confusion flooding my mind. "What video, son?" I whispered, barely audible, but Noah didn't look at me. He stared straight at Hayes, his eyes calm, certain, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Noah slipped his hand from mine, reached into his backpack under the chair, and pulled out a white envelope, slightly creased but carefully sealed. On it, I instantly recognized Dad's firm, angular handwriting. "To the lawyer, open only if things turn bad." My heart stopped. A jolt of hope and fear surged through me. "Noah," I whispered, my voice breaking, "where did you get this?" But Noah just shook his head slightly, his eyes fixed on Hayes, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. Hayes reached out, his voice gentle but cautious. "May I see it?" Noah didn't hesitate, passing the envelope across the table. The room leaned forward, as if the envelope were a bomb about to detonate. Stephen let out a soft laugh, but I heard the tremor in it. "What's this? Some joke?" he said, his voice trying for disdain, but betraying unease. Uncle George frowned, his gaze shifting from Noah to me, as if searching for a flaw to dismiss it. "Who knows? Could be fake," he muttered. But his usual confidence wavered. Hayes opened the envelope, the sound of tearing paper, loud in the deadly silence of the library. Inside was a small black USB drive, plain, and a folded sheet with Dad's handwriting. Hayes skimmed the note, and for the first time since entering, a flicker of surprise crossed his calm face. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something unexpected. "This is a video from Mr. William Carter," he said, his voice lower than usual, recorded before the final will. It was sealed with instructions to open only if tensions escalated. He glanced at Stephen, then Uncle George, his eyes a subtle reminder that they'd pushed things this far. Stephen shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. "What? He never mentioned any video," he snapped, his voice higher, his eyes panicked. Uncle George slammed a fist on the table, his face flushed. "We don't know what that is. It could be fake," he shouted. But Hayes raised a hand for silence. "I recognize Mr. Williams' handwriting and signature." he said evenly. Per his instructions, I'm legally obligated to play this video. I sank back into my chair, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. I looked at Noah, his eyes still calm, as if he'd known this would happen. Where did you get it? I asked again, whispering. But Noah just smiled faintly, his eyes saying I'd understand soon. I recalled a day years ago, when Noah asked to visit Grandpa with a neighbor. I let him go, thinking it was a brief visit, unaware of what they discussed, unaware Dad had entrusted him with this secret. My heart raced, torn between hope and fear of what was coming. Hayes plugged the USB into the black laptop on the table. The screen lit up, the logo fading to a simple play button. The room's air shifted. No more whispers, no soft laughter. Every eye locked on the screen, and I felt my heart ready to burst from my chest. The room fell silent, only the sound of quick breaths and creaking chairs from those around us. The towering oak bookshelves, the dim window light, and the scent of polished wood mixed with Stephen's cologne faded, overtaken by the tension gripping the room. When Robert Hayes pressed a key on the laptop, the screen flashed, went dark for a moment, then revealed my father, William. Dad sat at his desk in this very library, wearing the deep green sweater I gave him for his last birthday, a sweater I didn't know he'd ever worn. He looked older than I remembered, his hair white, shoulders slightly hunched, but his eyes weren't the cold ones from our arguments. He looked directly at the camera, and when he spoke, his first two words stopped my breath. Hello, Michael. My heart seized. Noah squeezed my hand lightly, but I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen. Dad folded his hands, his fingers trembling slightly. A small habit I shared. If you're watching this, he said, his voice low and tired. I'm gone, and things at the will reading have probably gone bad. He paused, looking down, as if searching for words. I know what the family thinks of you, Michael. I know what they say. And I said those things too. I was wrong. Tears welled in my eyes, but I bit my lip, trying to hold them back. Stephen, at the table's head, let out a soft huff, but I heard the unease in it. Uncle George stiffened, his gaze darting from the screen to me, as if he couldn't believe this was happening. The others, cousins, Dad's friends, sat still, their eyes wavering between shock and doubt. But I didn't care about them. I only heard Dad, his voice resonating, each word dismantling the wall between us. I believed what Stephen said, he continued. What George said, that you left because you didn't care about the family. I didn't ask you. I didn't listen. You tried to explain, but I shut the door on you, on Noah. His voice cracked, and I saw his eyes glisten. I remembered that day, 8 years ago, standing at the mansion's door, holding Noah, begging Dad to understand. I left to protect my son. But he turned away, calling me a traitor. I thought strength was pride, he said, that leaving was betrayal. But I was wrong, Michael. Strength is standing up, protecting your son, and you did that. You did what I couldn't. Tears rolled down my cheeks, hot, but I didn't wipe them away. Noah looked at me, his eyes gentle, as if saying he understood. I thought of those nights in New Haven, holding Noah, promising him a good life, even with nothing but my love and calloused hands. I met Noah once, Dad said, his voice warmer. He visited, just the two of us. I asked about you, and he said, my dad's the safest place in the world. That woke me up. I looked at Noah, stunned. I didn't know he'd said that, didn't know he'd brought me closer to Dad. Noah smiled faintly, and my heart warmed. I lost you, Michael, Dad said, his voice breaking. I lost my son because I was too caught up in being right. But I won't let my final act be pushing you away again. He cleared his throat, looking straight at the camera, his eyes resolute. So, I changed the will. A gasp came from somewhere. Maybe Stephen. Uncle George's chair creaked, and I heard someone mutter, but I didn't look away from Dad. I leave this mansion to you and Noah, he said, along with a savings fund and a college fund for Noah. I know it doesn't make up for what I destroyed, but I want you to have the peace I couldn't give you in life. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes softening. If they're angry, let them be. You deserve this, Michael. You overcame everything, and you never stopped being a father. That's what I couldn't do. Tears streamed down my face, and I covered my mouth, stifling a sob. Stephen whispered something to his wife, his voice shaky. Uncle George slammed a fist on the table, his face red, but I didn't care. Dad looked at the camera, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I'm proud of you, Michael. I love you, always have. And take care of Noah. Tell him I thank him. The laptop screen went black, but my father's words, William's words, lingered in my mind, like a gentle melody soothing old wounds. I'm proud of you, Michael. I love you. Those words, ones I never dared dream I'd hear, were now a small flame warming my cold heart. The silence enveloping the room was no longer heavy. It was serene, as if a storm had dissipated, leaving a clear sky. I sat there, hand over my mouth, tears streaming down my cheeks, soaking my sleeve. Noah held my hand, his eyes shining, a small smile as if he'd known the truth would prevail. I looked at him, my heart swelling with a mix of love, relief, and the ache of lost youth. The room stayed silent, but no one dared break it. Stephen, Uncle George, cousins, Dad's friends, all were still, as if Dad's video had drained their words. Then, a chair creaked, shattering the quiet. Stephen shot to his feet, face flushed, hands trembling as he grabbed his leather briefcase. He didn't look at me, at anyone, just spun and strode to the door, his shoes pounding the wood floor. His wife, Helen, hurried after her face red, muttering something unclear. I heard the oak door creak as they left, and part of me felt lighter, as if a shadow had lifted from the room. Uncle George lingered longer, his face rigid, jaw clenched, as if holding back rage. He glared at Hayes, his eyes itching to argue. But then he shook his head, stood, and walked out, his heavy footsteps echoing. The others, cousins, Dad's friends, rose one by one, some avoiding my gaze, others nodding slightly, perhaps in guilt or respect. I wasn't sure. They left, one after another, leaving the room empty. The whispers, soft laughter, contemptuous stare, all vanished, leaving only gentle silence. Hayes quietly closed his documents, cleared his throat, his voice softer than before. "There'll be some paperwork to finalize," he said, looking at me with a small, genuine smile. "But everything's arranged per Mr. Williams' wishes." I nodded, unsure what to say. Hayes gathered his things, gave a final nod, and left, leaving me and Noah alone in a room now filled only with our breathing. I turned to Noah, his eyes still bright, still calm, as if he'd carried the world to me. I pulled him into my arms, hugging him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small body. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking with tears. "Thank you for keeping that envelope." Noah looked up, his smile radiant, like sunlight through clouds. "I just wanted you to hear Grandpa," he said, his voice small but certain. I kissed his forehead, feeling an 8-year burden lift. I thought of those nights in New Haven, sitting alone after Noah slept, wondering if Dad ever thought of me, if he regretted shutting us out. The letters I wrote but didn't send, the calls I dialed then hung up, all now seemed a distant dream. Dad had seen me, heard me, and left not just an inheritance, but an apology, an acknowledgement I never dared hope for. His video didn't just change the will, it gave me back myself. I looked around the library, the window's light now brighter, as if this room, once my judge, had become a place of healing. I recalled the last time I stood here, 8 years ago, when Dad shouted I was no longer his son. That day, I left feeling I'd lost everything. But now, sitting here with Noah, I realized I'd reclaimed what mattered most. Not the mansion, not money, but Dad's love, even if it came late. I hugged Noah tighter, feeling his heartbeat sync with mine. "You did something huge," I said, my voice still choked. Noah tilted his head, his eyes sparkling. "I just wanted you to know Grandpa loved you," he said, as if it were the simplest thing. But to me, it was the world. Dad's words, William's words, echoed. "I'm proud of you, Michael. I love you." Those words, like a small flame, burned away 8 years of rejection, of being erased. This room, once my place of humiliation, now felt sacred, where Dad gave me back myself. Noah looked at me, his eyes shining, his small smile like sunlight through clouds. I pulled him close, feeling the warmth of his small body, and whispered, "You're my hero. You know that." Noah tilted his head, chuckling softly, his eyes twinkling. "I just wanted you to be happy," he said, his voice small but sincere. His words melted my heart. I kissed his forehead, feeling a peace I'd never known, as if every wound in my heart was starting to heal. I looked around the library, once an arena of contemptuous stare and vicious words from Stephen and Uncle George. Now it was empty, just me and Noah, but I didn't feel alone. I thought of those years in New Haven, sitting alone after Noah slept, wondering if Dad regretted shutting us out. The unsent letters, the unmade calls, all now a distant dream. Dad had seen me, acknowledged me, and Noah had brought him back to me. That was a gift greater than any inheritance. I stood, took Noah's hand, and we walked out of the library. The oak door creaked, but this time, it wasn't a sound of menace. We passed through the Carter Mansion's hallway, past family portraits I once felt estranged from. The sunset outside glowed, bathing the trees in gold. I led Noah to our old pickup truck, the scent of fresh-cut grass and birdsong lightening my heart. As I started the engine, I looked at Noah, saw him smile, and knew we weren't just leaving. We were starting a new chapter. I decided to renovate the mansion, make it a home for us, free of suffocating expectations. The college fund Dad left would secure Noah's future, letting him chase his dreams, unbound by the pressures once forced on me. But above all, I knew the real treasure wasn't the mansion or money. It was Dad's love, Noah's courage, and the truth that triumphed after years. I thought of those pushed aside, belittled, made to feel invisible. I wanted to tell them, you are not invisible. The truth may come late, may hurt, but it will find you. It found me, through Noah's 7 words, through Dad's video, through a boy's love that changed everything. If you've been hurt, erased from someone's story, trust that your worth isn't in their eyes. It's in your heart, in those who love you, in you. As the truck rolled down Greenville's country road, I felt whole for the first time in years. Dad saw me, Noah saved me, and I found myself. I smiled, not for the inheritance, but because I knew, no matter how painful the past, I'd walked through it, hand in hand with my son, and that truth, no one could take away. The story of Michael Carter and his son Noah, in asterisk, at Dad's will reading. They laughed at me. Then my son said 7 words that changed everything. Asterisk reflects deep values and challenges in American life today, especially family conflict, societal expectations, and the quest for recognition. In a modern context, where financial pressure, their reputation, and family tradition still shape many relationships, this story offers lessons on resilience, the value of truth, and the power of family love. Michael, a mechanic in New Haven, was shunned by his wealthy Greenville, Connecticut family for refusing to take over Carter properties, a symbol of American economic success. The hostility from Stephen and Uncle George, with insults like "Dad hated you," and "even the kid knows his dad's useless," mirrors the competitive culture and division in elite families, where personal worth is often judged by wealth and status. Yet, William's video, revealing love and regret, and Noah's 7 wording, "You forgot Grandpa's video," shattered the wall of misunderstanding, showing that truth, even if late, can heal. The takeaway is, in modern American life, where material success can fracture families, hold fast to your self-worth and the power of love. Don't let judgments, like Stephen's contemptuous stare, define you. Cherish those like Noah, who believe in and fight for you, and face the past bravely, as Michael did, by staying in the library. The truth will find its way, bringing recognition and peace, even in the darkest moments. If Michael and Noah's story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to catch more emotional journeys. Thanks for joining, and see you in the next video.